You are listening to the 10th Men podcast,
where we discuss the ideas, theories, and principles to help you live a wealthy, healthy, and happy life.
My name is Harish, and I'm a third-year medical student.
And my name is Felix. I'm a graduate entry medical student and content creator. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the 10th Men podcast. My name is Felix, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Harish. Say hi.
Hi, guys.
So today we've got a really exciting episode for you. This is something that Harish and I have talked about a lot. It comes up so much, especially since we're students. It's on procrastination, it's on being distracted, and on also living an intentional life. And we'll get into what all of that means throughout this episode. So just a quick summary so you know what to expect. We're going to explore why do we procrastinate? What actually is procrastination? Why do we do it? And then we're going to jump over to how we can actually stop procrastinating, or how we can develop a state of being where we don't try and procrastinate, where we live an intentional life. What are maybe the methods or even the practices that we can use in order to achieve a point where we don't have to procrastinate, or we try not to procrastinate. And lastly, we talk about what benefits you can actually get from not procrastinating. I mean, what's the outcome? What's the end result here? What do you gain, or what do you lose rather, when you stop procrastinating? So those are the things that we're going to go through today. So the first question, okay, is why do we procrastinate? Harish, kick it off, man.
So, before we jump into the question of why do we procrastinate, I think we have to address the main issue, which is what is the definition of procrastination? So, if you just do a quick Google search, the definition is where you basically delay or postpone an action. But there is a common misconception out there about procrastination, because nowadays people use procrastination synonymously with distraction. And you have to understand these two are actually different things. You have to differentiate these two. So procrastination is when you stop doing a task, like, a essay or like a homework, and indulge in less valuable tasks. But that less valuable task gives you more happiness or satisfaction. An example would be, you suddenly switching to watch Netflix when you're actually supposed to be studying. So that's procrastination. Distraction is basically something that prevents someone from concentrating on a task. So an example would be a loud music, or like, a construction site that's nearby making loads of drilling noise that prevents you from concentrating on your homework or your studying, basically. So I think we need to differentiate these two, because nowadays people say, oh yeah, I'm distracted a lot when I'm studying. No, you got to differentiate the definition of procrastination and distraction. Now, jumping into the question of why do we procrastinate? Well, I basically categorize it in just two reasons, but there's one overarching umbrella reasoning for this, and it's lack of motivation. But as I said, it's not just as simple as that is, and there are two sub reasons for it. First one will be flawed perception of time. Well, I'll just give you an example. Like, I think most of you would have found yourself in a situation where an essay will be assigned to you, which is due in like 2 months, and you deep down know it would actually take a month to do the entire essay. But some people, including me as well, we can assume that, oh yeah, it can be finished in 1 week. It's not a big deal. Yeah, we'll finish it in 1 week. And the closer we get towards the deadline, that's when we realize we hit the fan. We realize we are deep, deep in trouble. We realize we're going to be like rushing the entire assignment. So the first thing is the flawed perception of time. The second category is difficulty in achieving actionable tasks. So nowadays people have a goal. So the first one was about flawed perception of time. That means they have a goal, but then their whole perception of time was flawed. Now, as people have the goal, and then they have actually broken down their goal into actionable tasks, and then they've assigned like a certain time period for each actionable task. So let's use the example in this case. Let's say everyone wants to be the best director who directs the best movie out there, like, Inception. I mean, that's, in my opinion, is the best movie out there. And, they're motivated to be the best director, and they want to win an Oscar for it. So, to achieve a goal, the first thing you have to do is break it down into actionable items. But let's be honest, more often than not, there will be some steps that are genuinely, genuinely hard. And when we reach
Mhm.
such steps, we immediately give up. They'll be like, oh, this is too hard, man. I mean, like, I'm just gonna maybe just stop doing this, maybe just switch over to Netflix, switch over to Amazon Prime, just watch a couple of movies, and then you're just going down the spiral where you never get back up again. Well, you have to
Mhm.
understand that if these actionable items were actually easy, everyone out there would actually be the next Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino producing the best movies out there. So there is an
Mhm.
entry to barrier. You have to get through these hard steps so that you could be the next best director out in the market. I mean, I'll be honest.
Mhm.
The best example of this would be sometimes I myself found me skipping certain lectures that are too hard when I'm not actually supposed to be doing it. So yeah, I think these are the main two reasons why people actually, procrastinate. What do you think about that, Felix?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sense in that, in having to split the whole distraction and also procrastination idea. But I'll go off what you just said around splitting up goals and then I'll work my way backwards. So, the first thing that you said was, or the most recent thing was that some people essentially they'll hit a hard task and then they'll just be like, nah, you know what? I want to watch Netflix just because that's the easier option, right? Well, there's a
Mhm.
really good quote, okay, that this is wrong, so true at so many parts of my life, right? It goes like this. I'm not actually sure who said it. I think I heard it from like a motivational speaker, Les Brown. So he said, "Do what is hard, and your life will be easy. But do what is easy, and your life will be hard." Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that really resonates with what you're saying. Yeah. And the other thing that you said is the whole point that people kind of leave things last minute to the deadlines. That kind of resonates with Parkinson's law, right? Where the action item expands to fit the allotted time that you give it. So if you give something 2 months to get done, right? Let's say you have an essay, you've got 2 months to get it done. You know you don't need 2 months to get it done, so you leave it till 2 days. When
Mhm.
technically, you could have taken those 2 days to get it done right at the beginning of the deadline. Save
Mhm.
yourself a lot of stress, save yourself a lot of worry. But
Yes.
no, you wait till 2 days before the deadline.
Mhm.
You're like, you know what? Now would be a good time to start. And even then, you procrastinate from doing it until it's like, actually, you either do it or you don't, so you either start working on it now and you finish it,
Mhm.
or you get a bad grade. Some people leave it to that mark. So I definitely think, in terms of breaking down the whole motivation thing to having specific goals, and also not sort of skipping out on hard things, because I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode where I said it is often the first step that's the hardest, but it's the next step that counts. You have to keep at it, you have to be consistent. So the origin of procrastination is from Latin word of procrastinationem, right? Which means quite literally putting off from day to day, right? It's basically when you put something off, you're like, oh, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's the next hour, the next 10 minutes, you're like, I'll just take a quick nap and then I'll do part 2 of this essay, right? You're putting something off. And to me, it's essentially how we lose time because of the distractions and also the inability to control how we respond to certain things. So, as to why we procrastinate, I think it is often a lack of motivation or interest in whatever it is that you're doing right now. And like you said, that can come from multiple sources. The lack of interest could come from you just don't want to be doing this right now. In fact, we had the motivation versus discipline thing a long time ago, and we were talking about how discipline is making yourself do something that you fundamentally don't want to do. So let's say that you're doing, I don't know, algebra or trigonometry or calculus or whatever it is, right? You don't actually want to do it, right? So you're not motivated to do it. So you're looking for any distraction, right? You're looking for that one text or that one movie or that one sort of noise, right? Outside to distract you. So you have a reason to
Mhm.
stop doing this
Mhm.
and to
Mhm.
go do that, right? And it's the same thing with exams. When you work in a group, you're waiting for like your friend to come and like ask you a question so you can stop doing whatever it is that you're doing and just take 5 minutes off to do something else, right?
Mhm.
And we should, I'm not saying we shouldn't have breaks, but we almost look for distractions, right? We are seeking distractions when we are doing something we don't want to do. If we're doing something that we absolutely love doing, for example, like, watching a movie, right? If we were watching my favorite movie as well, Inception, I didn't know it was your favorite movie. I thought your favorite movie was The Dark Knight.
Well, I mean, basically Christopher Nolan, man. I mean, all Christopher Nolan movies are my
Okay.
favorites.
All right. Fair enough. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So if you're watching your favorite movie, you're not, let's say someone, your dad or your mom comes in and says, "Hey, can I just change the channel?" You're not even listening. you know, you're not even paying attention to what they're saying because you're so engrossed in this movie, right? Like, genuinely, it doesn't matter. So when we think about procrastination and distraction, first you do have to think, do I actually want to be doing this? Is this something that I want to do? And the second thing is, I agree on that. Sometimes we have hard things that we need to do, and they're just a really tough, it's just a really tough task that we have to overcome. And the thing is, what we try and do is we try to do something easier to sort of emulate the progress, or to sort of create progress, if that makes sense. So you'll be like, oh, I have to do this worksheet, right? Instead, you'll be like, oh, you know what? Let me actually, you know what I'll do? I will make notes on everything that's related to the worksheet first before I do the worksheet. You'll sort of sub divert yourself into doing other tasks that are very small, right? And technically they work towards your goal of wanting to complete this worksheet, but it is not the most important thing you could be doing. Because if you've heard of the Pareto's rule, which is the 80-20 rule, if you take a task, right, there is 20% of this task which will give you 80% of the outcome.
Hmm.
And when we tackle a really tough task, if it's really hard, what we'll tend to do is we'll do the 80%. If we have a really hard task, what we will do instead is that we'll do the 80% of that really easy type of stuff that only gives 20% of the outcome, because the rest of the stuff is hard. That 20% is really hard to do.
Hmm.
So I think that's what you mean by how we get distracted to do other tasks that are easier. Because the thing is, to our heads, the easiest person to fool is yourself.
Yeah.
By doing all of these small tasks, you will start to fool yourself into thinking, oh, yeah, I'm making progress. But the thing is, if you're doing low yield stuff, which is the 80% of stuff that gives you 20% of the outcome, then you're only ever going to get 20% of the outcome,
Hmm.
right? What you
Hmm.
should really be doing is the hard stuff, that 20% that's going to give you 80% of the outcome. But obviously, that's hard. So those are the two reasons, I think, again, agreeing with you, why we procrastinate. So now that we've laid out some of the reasons as to what procrastination is and why we actually procrastinate in the first place, how can we work on this whole habit of procrastinating? How can we work on not getting distracted and staying intentional and true to our tasks, Harish?
So yeah, before we jump to the solutions on how we can stop procrastination, I think we have to discuss the issue of awareness of our actions. So I'm going to make a couple of statements based on the handful of people I've talked to, but I believe there are a small handful of people who do not come to terms with the fact that they actually procrastinate. They blame it on the fact, oh, they lack focus or they just are easily distracted. And then there's the other group who are actually aware of the fact that they procrastinate. I myself believe I fall within this group. So yeah, I think we just have to make a differentiation between those two groups. Now, on to the solutions. I believe there are loads of tools to help you solve the problem of procrastination. However, I think it doesn't solve the problem at its core because it is the mindset which is the problem. And the solution for this whole problem is meditation. Yeah, I just said it. It's just out there. I know that came out of nowhere, but I will tell you my journey on how I came to the point that meditation is the solution for procrastination. As I said earlier, there are loads of applications that helps you prevent procrastination, like the Pomodoro timer and whatnot. And I saw this so many YouTube videos. I think there was one on by Thomas Frank. I'm not sure. I'm not going to name drop, but it was about how every time you get distracted, you write down the distractions on a piece of paper, and it seemed pretty easy to follow, right? But as I was doing this essay and I had this pen and paper beside me, there was a small little voice inside of me that was going, "Watch Umbrella Academy. Watch Umbrella Academy." It was literally saying that. And I knew I had to write the distraction down on the piece of paper. But despite that, I just pushed the pen and paper away. I simply opened up a new tab and I went into the rabbit hole of watching Umbrella Academy. And at this point, that is when I realized these are all just tools to help me stop procrastinating. I need to get to the core problem because the fact that I push the pen and paper away has nothing to do with the pen and paper, but rather my mindset. And that's when I realized I have to change my mindset. And that's when I started researching on how to change my mindset of how to stop procrastination. And that is when I came across this thing called meditation. Now, this is going to be linking back to the first episode of where I used the example of this monk Dandabani. So, just to give you a brief summary of what it is, he basically says our mind, our brain is just a vast space with the different sectors, such as food, education, social activities, sex, and whatnot. And our awareness is like a spotlight that shines on each sector as we participate in those sector. And every time we study, our spotlight is on the studying sector. And he says the trick for meditation is we need to be aware of where we personally shine the spotlight because nowadays we are not in control of the spotlight. We are letting external factors control where we shine the light. So if we see the phone, we'll get involved in games. If we see the laptop and iPad, we will naturally move to entertainment as a sector. We are not consciously controlling where we shine the spotlight. I'll give you an example of this. The most simple example, this is like a simple analogy. It's a Tesla car. Imagine you're riding down the road with a Tesla car. Do you know the auto driving system? Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
And when the car, when it's going down one lane and when the car shifts into another lane, there's a sensor that immediately pushes back into the lane that it was driving in. And I feel that sensor is our consciousness that tells us that we are getting distracted, we're going to the wrong lane, get the hell back to your work right now. I think
Hmm.
that is what the monk is trying to say. We have to have this conscious awareness of where we are going. Every time we get distracted, every time we get derailed, there should be a small voice that pops up and says, get back to your work. I'll give you another example of where I've not mastered meditation, but I've seen the effects of meditation. So I was watching this 1 hour YouTube video on how to draw. And the first 10 minutes, my mind was genuinely going, come on, open up Amazon Prime. Let's watch this new show called Breathe. But I think one of my friends recommended it, Sani. He said it's a R. Madhavan acted in it or something. And it's an amazing show, basically. And my mind was going there, let's watch it. So let's watch it. It's a crime thriller show. And as I was thinking that, a small voice popped up and said, does this add value to your life? If you actually watch that Amazon Prime video right now, are you going to get any benefit out of it? No. So get the hell back to work again. So then naturally, I realized I was getting distracted and I went back to doing my work. So this is how I have reaped the rewards of meditation. And meditation is not a very simple task. You know, people just think you just sit in one place and you just become enlightened. It's not like that. It'll take effort. And I'm not going to go into the whole area of how to meditate. That tons of YouTube videos on how you can meditate. And now, I did mention in the previous question that another group of people who have problem achieving hard steps, hard actionable items. And I'm going to link you to this philosopher back in the Roman times. His name is Diogenes the Cynic. And he adopted this very poor way, he just wears a single robe. And he was basically on the streets, living on the streets, basically. And he believes if you put your mind and body through hardship, eventually, further down the line in life, you would achieve true happiness. Well, I'm not saying everyone should just should wear a simple robe and walk the streets. All I'm saying is you need to understand that you have to put yourself through a bit of hardships before you can actually become the best at what you do. As I said earlier on, if it was easy to become a professional movie director, then everyone would actually become the next Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan. You actually have to get that mental tenacity to get through those hard steps so that eventually you could be the best at what you do. What do you think, Felix?
Okay, so I think Harris has touched on a lot of really good points, but I think it's played a lot into my cards as well. We do separate research for this stuff, so it's quite cool how he's come up with similar stuff. So the first thing he mentioned was awareness, right? Awareness or attention, okay, is really, really important just in life, okay? And it comes from this whole practice of meditation. And I'll get into that right now. So I think procrastination, actual act, comes from a lack of awareness, right? So if you just for a second forget about all these apps and if you forget all about these sort of methods and techniques to stop procrastination, just think of it this way, right? Because the thing is, if you bring your awareness to something, so let's say that you are angry, right? Let's say you're angry. If you're aware that you're angry, it starts to disappear. Now, on the opposite, if it's something good, so let's say you're eating, I don't know, pizza, right? If you are fully aware of the taste of the pizza, right, it amplifies the taste, right? If you focus yourself on purely tasting whatever it is in your mouth, it amplifies the taste. So, what I'm trying to say, awareness, firstly, tends to make the bad sort of diminished and the good amplified. Okay. And I think a good example of this is, have you ever noticed that if you're having an argument, right, with someone, let's say it's a fully blown out argument, you're fighting over stuff, and someone will call on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you'll pick up the phone, and within the space of 4 seconds, the anger disappears. Your voice returns to normal, and you're talking over the phone, just like a normal person. Why does that happen?
I don't know.
It's because you become aware of that, right? You
Okay.
suddenly realize, wait, what am I doing? You get you get knocked out of it, right? So using that sort of logic, meditation is probably the best thing I can recommend to develop awareness. And awareness is the best thing I can recommend to live an intentional life, a life free of distraction, and a life free of procrastination, at least. So, what I'm trying to say is that as a lifestyle, right, if you want to avoid procrastination, be aware. And being aware includes a bunch of things. Here's a few things that I became aware of in my life and I used to avoid procrastination. The first thing I did was to control inputs and my sources of dopamine, right? This goes back to the first podcast episode we ever did. But one of the things that Harish mentioned was the fact that people sort of have these external points of triggers, right? So you'll see a phone and you'll be like, oh, wow, I'll get a notification. I want to check it quickly. In fact, I think they did an experiment where essentially there was a scientist and they would take someone else's phone, right? They would take someone else's phone, put it in front of them, and they were basically monitoring any dopamine releases or stimulation. And even when there was a notification on someone else's phone, it triggered dopamine, right? It's not even their phone, it's someone else's phone, yet it still triggered dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit about Pavlov's dog, right? It's Pavlovian conditioning, right? So when you give the dog food, it salivates. It's sort of similar to that. So the thing that I did was I control my inputs of dopamine. I control my sources of distractions. And I think this is the easiest way to start. And this all came from awareness. So I have two fundamental things I do. The first thing is that I notice that social media is a huge point of distraction, right? So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. So what I try and do is that the iPhone has become very good at being a distraction, but fortunately, Apple has given you some tools to sort of overcome that. So if you can check your screen time, you can check how many times you've picked up your phone just on your settings app, right? You can check all of this. And alongside that, you can also control something called your screen time. So what I do is I set a 15-minute limit on all social media except Twitter, because Twitter's sort of slightly different. I use it for different reasons. But Facebook and Instagram, basically the things that you scroll mindlessly on, I always set a limit. Now, the importance of a limit is that when that 15 minutes is up, the iPhone will basically show me a screen which says, listen, you've used up your time that you told yourself you weren't going to cross. Okay, you can now jump in and spend more time on it. Do you want to do it? And it's that extra bit of resistance that really makes me think. And I think it's done wonders for my life because ever since I've been doing this, I've done this for like a long time. And I think when I first started it, my friends absolutely hated me because I just like you wouldn't get responses from me. Even now, you're not going to get instant responses from me if you message me. And that's because alongside this 15-minute time limit, I also have something called a notifications control, right? So I personally check social media twice a day around there on my phone. During the holidays is a bit more, but somewhere around 11 o'clock and then somewhere in the evening, right? That's when I really check social media, work through all of the messages, etc. I don't check it a lot unless there's a specific reason for me to do so. So knowing that, what I try and do is I bulk process all of like my notifications. And the way I do it is that I make sure that no notification unless it's emergent, like calls or texts, because people only text me if it's like a very, very important thing. So unless it's a call or a text, these notifications don't appear on my home screen, right? So they only appear in the notification center. So even when I'm using my phone, unless I swipe down from my notification center, I can't see these notifications. Even if they appear, I won't be able to see them. And the thing is, like, people may then say, oh, what if you miss something really important? I mean, like, what am I going to miss? Like, Witcher season 2 is out. I mean, I know that's pretty important, but, you know, what's the biggest thing I could miss? Because I still have my calls. And if it's truly urgent, people know they'll just call me, right? So those are the ways that I've used to control my inputs, at least on my phone. The next thing Harris touched upon is the fact that he would do all of these tips and tricks from Thomas Frank, right? And they wouldn't work. This is such an important thing, I think, to tackle because what he's talking about is prescriptions. What they are temporary band aids, right? They fix the problem temporarily. So, for example, in Harris's case, he has this whole pen and paper system, but the pen and paper system only works, right, if he actively wants to work, right? Because ultimately, he could be watching Netflix. And like he gave the example, he's just like, you know what, I'm just not going to write it today. The same way, I could have this whole system of like social media timers, but I could just basically turn it off. I could just be like, you know what, today I'm just not going to bother. And that's essentially what prescriptions are. That's what these band-aids do. They're temporary sort of fixes. They're just treatments, but they're not cures, right? So if you think about procrastination, once you engage in the act of procrastination, you're basically done for. And what I mean by that is if you start watching a Netflix series or a YouTube video, you're probably not going to stop unless you meditate and you're sort of used to snapping yourself out of distractions. You're not going to stop until something snaps you out of it, right? So I'll try and explain this. And Harish, tell me if this makes sense, okay?
Go on.
So have you ever been on any sort of like binge, right? So you're procrastinating on YouTube
Obviously.
and you're on YouTube, you're procrastinating, okay?
Oh yeah.
So have you ever got to a point where like the episode's finished, right? It's Friends season 7, like episode 29, and at the end of it, it's like it's just a reflection of you looking into the screen.
Oh
And at that
yeah.
moment,
Been there
and at
before,
that
man.
yeah, and at that moment you're like, what the hell am I doing? I've been here for 4 hours and I've eaten like 6 tubs of ice cream.
You just
I was
know
supposed to
that.
finish my essay today.
Yeah, you just know that at that point of time, you just messed up big time. You know, you have like 4 hours left for the essay, and then you're going to sleep in the next 2 hours. So that means you're going to pull it all night. The whole.
Exactly. And then that's another cycle because then you get stressed is like, oh my God, okay. So if I start an all nighter now, then you'll be like, okay, if I work for an hour now, then I can come back here and watch another episode between the already short time you have, right? Or, for example, you're doing the same binge and maybe your parents or your friend comes into the room, right?
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
suddenly, have
Back
you
to
ever
reality.
got to a point where you get knocked out of the procrastination
Yeah,
and you're
back
like,
to
what am I
reality.
doing? So then what you do is you get up, you make a loud statement like, "Oh, damn. Oh, I got distracted for 4 minutes, guys." I mean, it's actually 4 hours. You'll be like, "Oh, just 4 minutes. Okay? Oh, man. Oh, silly me. Let me get back to work."
Been there before. Like the way I procrastinate is simple. It'd be like if I start procrastinating at 4 p.m., I'd be like, yeah, let's start work at 4:10. When it reaches 4:10, I'll be like, let's finish the episode. And when
Yeah.
the episode finishes, it'll be like 4:22. Like, no, let's wait for it to reach a whole number,
Yeah.
4:30. And then you'll start a
Exactly.
whole new episode again.
Yeah, you start rationalizing, and it's only when someone comes in, what happens is you get self-conscious, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh my god, does this person think I'm just a waste man, right? Am I just sitting here eating ice cream? And then that external sort of input will knock you out of that state for a second, and then you'll get up, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll stand up, and as soon as you stand up, you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna go upstairs and do work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing was triggered by something external coming in and disturbing your procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'm trying to say is that the key to not procrastinating is to knock yourself out of that loop before you enter the activity. Because once you click play on that Netflix episode, right, the episode absorbs you completely.
Definitely.
Once you sit in a movie theater, the movie absorbs you. you know if it's a good movie, you're not going to be thinking about, oh, you know when's my essay due. No, you're completely absorbed in it, and there's just no point until something external kicks you out, until the lights come on. You're gone, right? And this is where meditation comes in. So Harris said something like, um, some people consciously, or most people consciously know that they're procrastinating. I would actually argue against that by saying a lot of people don't know that they're doing this. At least when they're doing it, they don't know, because there's nothing else. It's just them and the movie, and then when they click play, it's just the movie. There's no voice in them going, oh, should I be studying? Should I be doing this? It's
No.
just a movie. There's
What
nothing else,
I
right?
argue is that
Mm.
when people actively make the decision to procrastinate, they're aware of the decision. That's what I'm saying. When they procrastinate, when they're watching a Netflix episode, of course they do not know they're procrastinating, but the
Yeah.
minute they click on the Netflix, the minute they move the cursor, they're actively aware that they're actually going to procrastinate. That's what I'm saying.
See, I think they are actively aware that they're going to watch something for
Mm-mm.
5 minutes.
Oh yeah, okay,
Okay,
yeah, that makes
they're
much more.
actively aware that they're going to, oh, is this the trailer for the new Batman movie? Oh, let me just, I'm aware that this is the trailer. Oh, I'm aware that this is only 2 minutes long, so I'm aware it's going to only last 2 minutes, right? But once you're in, that's it. It's finished. You're gone, right? You've lost awareness, because
That's true.
once you're in that thing, it autoplay is on.
Yeah, I'll give an
And then
example.
you're,
Like
yeah,
recently,
go
so
for it.
when as you said the Batman trailer, so it
Uh,
started off with the Batman trailer. Like this happened like just 2 weeks ago. No,
yeah.
1 week ago. I think that's when Batman trailer was released. I think, yeah, Batman trailer was released. I started
Hmm.
watching Batman trailer just like 3 minutes long. The teaser. That's
Hmm.
like, yeah. After this, I'll get back to work. Next thing I realized I was watching the psychology behind the Dark Knight.
See, this is funny because I told you it would happen. Right. A little bit of backstory. I found the new Batman trailer like last week when we were recording for the podcast. I think it was afterwards. Or was it before? I'm not sure. Anyway, I sent Harrison, or I told him about it. He started listening to it. And I was like, oh, that's really good, man. So I went along, about my stuff. 3 or 4 hours later, Harris sends me like this long message about what the psychology behind the bat is, and the really in-depth analysis of what the trailer is. So what happened was that he clicked on a trailer, right, which is 5 minutes long, and he's spent the next like three, or I don't know how long you spent, 2 or 3 hours just going into this rabbit hole. And at no point when you were in the rabbit hole did you realize you were in the rabbit hole,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. That's very true.
So that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think people consciously realize when they are procrastinating, when they're about to procrastinate, they don't do it with the idea of procrastinating. You clicked on that trailer with the idea of stopping after 5 minutes, just like someone smokes a cigarette with the idea of stopping after one smoke. Do you get what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
But instead, that turned into 2, 3, 4 hours. And until, like, your mate comes in and is like, what are you doing? And you're like, what am I doing? And then you just don't remember what happened the last 3 or 4, 5 hours, because you've just been on this rabbit hole. And it's only now when someone's like knocked you out of it that you're like, damn, what's happened? What's the time? You don't even realize time's passed.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, this is where meditation comes in, because meditation is often misinterpreted, especially by students, because, like, let's be honest, like students like us, right, it will literally try it for 5 minutes and then give up, and that's it. That's it. We'll be like, what the hell is this? I'm done, right? People think that meditation is about emptying your mind for 5 minutes, right? You feel some measure of bliss, some measure of, inner peace or whatever you want to call it. And then you leave it at that. And then you go on your way and then you finish the rest of your day, right? I think the way I see it, or from the knowledge and the books I've read, is that meditation is a pathway, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the first step to becoming meditative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'll try and explain what this means. So being meditative means that you are aware,
Mm-hmm.
just aware,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think there's a story. I think it's some philosopher by Osho. He's had some bad press recently, but anyway, he had the story where he was talking about the Buddha, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Buddha was sort of, I think he was meditating under a tree or something, and someone asked him, who are you? Are you a prince? Are you a singer? Are you a dancer? He just said a bunch of different stuff. Are you a god? And Buddha was like, I am pure awareness. Or he would say something along the lines of, I am awake, or I am pure awareness, right? So when he says I am awake, what does that even mean? I think it means that he is aware, okay? And uh, when I mention this to people, when I try and go into a bit more depth about what procrastination awareness is, people are like, but I am aware. I am awake. Like, of course, yeah, I am like physically, I'm awake. I have all my faculties, but actually, were you really paying attention? Really? Because if you were paying attention, you wouldn't procrastinate, right? You would see the trailer or you would see the movie as a distraction and say, no, this is not conducive to what I'm doing. And therefore, I will not engage in it. And it's so prevalent when I talk to people just about general distraction and problems. They would just say, oh, I just binge watch YouTube for 4 or 5 hours straight. But the thing is, I have no idea why it happened. Why do you never remember why it happened? Because you weren't paying attention. You weren't paying attention in the first place. That's why you don't remember what happened and why it happened. Does that make sense? Because you didn't know it was happening
Yeah.
until
Mm-hmm.
it finished.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, oh, wow, I can't believe it. It's sort of like a lucid dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're in a dream, you think everything is real, right? You happily do everything, and then you'll see something super crazy. Like you'll see, I don't know, like Obama riding on a horse, flying on a planet, surrounded by angels, right? Or something really trippy, and then you will go, "Oh my god, this is a dream, isn't it?" It takes something really sort of weird to knock you out. And that's what I mean. Like when you are procrastinating, it's almost a state where you're just sleeping. And that's where you have to develop awareness. And the whole idea of meditation is not to sort of sit there for 5 minutes, have your 5 minutes of bliss, and then go off into the world and just like repeat it daily. The whole idea of meditation is that you transfer that state of being you are when you sit there, you empty your mind, you let thoughts come and go, you don't judge it, and you just pay attention. It's not about just sitting there for 15 minutes. It's about trying to bring it to the whole day. It's about transferring that state of no judgment and of attention throughout the whole day and bringing that awareness throughout the whole day. Imagine if you could be at the level of peace you were if you've ever tried meditating. Imagine if you could be in that state throughout the whole day. Do you think you'll procrastinate then, Harish?
No, I don't think so.
Because you're like constantly aware of what's going on, right? And I'm reminded of a example that Jordan Peterson says, right? Uh, he's a seriously famous psychologist now because he's written books and he's all over YouTube.
Peterson Jordan.
uh, yeah, Harris calls him Peterson Jordan because he can't remember the name. But essentially, he has this sort of saying where he says, if you're struggling with something in your life, just spend some time watching yourself, which is another way of saying be more meditative. Just watch yourself. But then most people will say, oh, I already do this every day. I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, were you really aware? Because that doesn't sound like you're really paying attention, right? Because if you're paying attention, then why are you eating unhealthy things? Why are you hanging around with toxic people? Why are you sort of not doing productive things or things that you want to do? If you're really paying attention, why would you do anything other than something you were motivated to do, right? And when you're motivated to do something and you do that thing, so for example, if Roger Federer is playing tennis, and he gets lost within that tennis, that's a good thing. It allows him to perform. It's not a bad thing to get lost within what you're doing. You just need to make sure what it is you're doing is actually something you want to do. because otherwise you will just end up procrastinating. You don't really want to do it anyway, and you're not paying attention. So that's something I'm maybe, going further into this will basically go into another episode. So I'll stop there, the whole sort of meditation awareness. But to cut off procrastination at its root, to not be dependent on things like, apps, or, write things down on a piece of paper. Like, these things are helpful, but they're like treatment. None of them are the cure, right? They're just band-aids. If not now, then later they will come off. That's my whole idea on awareness, because meditation is really about bringing around a pure awareness. And I think Harish's example really illustrates that. And if you're looking for apps, I can recommend a ton of apps. I personally use Forest, okay? But like I said, these are all prescriptions. Just because I said use the app or use Forest or use this technique, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you, right? Because your distractions are different, your life is different, the way you think is different. And that's why the only thing that could probably really fully cure sort of this whole procrastination thing, because then, you don't need all these temporary fixes. You will have the awareness, you will live an intentional life. So yeah, I think that's what I had about how to overcome procrastination.
So, yeah, Felix, now that we have discussed, what exactly is procrastination and what are the different ways we can stop procrastination, I think we have to address the next big question. What benefits can you reap from not procrastinating? Do you think there's any benefit at all? Hmm?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits, and I think it goes much further than just being able to focus on your studies, right? If firstly you become quite productive, but most importantly, I think you start living an intentional life, right? A life with less distractions is a life where you can focus more on the things that you care about. It's sort of like minimalism, right? Because what minimalists do is that because they have less possessions, they are almost like less possessed by their possessions, if that makes sense.
So, yeah.
Like, so for example, because they have less possessions, they get to use whatever small things they have more. In that case, you become very aligned and you do things that you want to genuinely do. You become very aligned and you start to do things that you actually want to do. You get a sense of clarity, and also you won't waste time. And this is probably one of the most valuable things, because time is a limited resource. You also live an intentional life where everything you do is what you meant to do. And in doing so, you do it with a 100% of yourself, right? So if you want to relax, then relax. If you want to watch Netflix, then watch Netflix. That's fine. But don't try and watch Netflix when you're trying to do a 5,000 word essay. Don't think of a million other things when you're trying to pay attention to your subject. In that way, almost, you want to sort of like cultivate mindlessness or thoughtlessness rather than mindfulness,
Mm-hmm,
right? You
mm-hmm. That
don't
makes
want
sense.
your mind to be full
Yeah,
of just all of these judgments and all of these thoughts. And, did you
basically
turn on
junk.
the hose? Yeah, like, did you turn on, you don't want your mind to be thinking about that. When you're relaxing, fully relax. When you're brushing your teeth, focus on brushing your teeth. Okay. Because the thing is, you are someone who wants to sort of be at your peak performance when you're studying, right? It almost makes sense not to think about studying all the time, to save your mental energy until you really need to study. And when you need to study, you go as hard as you can. You don't think about Netflix. You don't think about brushing your teeth when you're studying. You only think about studying. But yeah, these are sort of the things. So try and cultivate mindlessness, be more meditative. And these are just things that I've been thinking about. And even my thoughts are constantly changing on it. So yeah, that's the benefits that I think you can get. How about you, Harish? What benefits have you got?
Well, before I jump into that, I just like to point out it is okay to relapse once in a while. Don't beat yourself up if you procrastinate. Because, as I said just last week, I went into this rabbit hole of watching the Dark Knight psychology of Batman. So, I mean, people do make mistakes, but from what I believe, if you stop procrastinating, the most obvious answer is you become productive. Obviously, you start doing your work on time, you start submitting assignments on time, your life is perfect. I mean, not perfect, but you will be happy. And the process of you doing meditating allows you, as he said, achieve inner peace. You'll become like Poe. You'll start to catch fireworks with your bare hands. I'm just joking. What I'm saying
Yeah,
is,
don't do that. Don't try that at home, please.
I mean, as I said, the meditation is something that I've taken up recently in the past few months. It takes a couple of months to see the effects. I can tell you that for sure right now because I just started it. It does take weeks. You can't just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna do meditation once a week and I'm gonna be like enlightened. It doesn't work that way. You have to be patient. You got to stick to the process. If you stick to the routine, you'll eventually see the benefits. That's all I've got to say. And obviously, if you learn the fact that you have to put yourself through that hardships to achieve certain goals, you will be able to achieve your goals in the long run. That's all I can say for now.
The last thing I want to say, I know that talking about trying to almost cure procrastination rather than just putting band-aids on it is quite an abstract concept, and it's very, very individualistic. What works for me may not work for you, but being aware in itself is just enough, right? So remember, using all of these apps, using all of these methods, they're all temporary fixes. They don't really like completely fix it forever. You'll relapse later on. What you really want to fix is your awareness. You want to become more aware. If you're procrastinating, inquire into why it is you're procrastinating. Why? Like, why is it? Is what you're doing right now not actually interesting enough? Is your work boring? Why is it boring? Did you pick the wrong thing to revise right now? Or did you pick the wrong time to revise? Because it's 2:30 a.m. You're tired and your attention is so low that any YouTube video that you come across is so much better than whatever you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, if you're in a cinema, if you're watching Endgame, are you procrastinating? No. Are you texting anyone? No, because your whole attention is in it. Another example is from another philosopher, and I think this is one of the best way to put it. His name is Jiddu Krishnamurti. I absolutely love him. He says that the attention you should try and cultivate is like living with a rattlesnake in your room.
Jesus,
Okay, so
that's
let's say
extreme.
you're in your room and there's a rattlesnake in your room. Every inch of you is focused on where that snake is moving. Like
I
if it
think.
moves a centimeter, you'll know
Mhm.
about it. Like every bit of your being is focusing on when that snake is moving. You're not going to check Netflix. You're not going to think about other stuff. There's nothing in your head apart from the movement, right? In that way, you'll notice how much more aware you become, right? The more aware you become, the less thinking there is. Because when you're focusing on the movement of the snake, there's no thoughts in your head. It's completely silent, right? You're not thinking about anything else. And I think this is why things like cold showers become popular, because it forces this whole meditative process within you. Because when you go into that cold shower, you think of nothing else apart from the piercing cold on your skin. I say this because I do this all the time. Like, all you can imagine, all you can think of in that moment is cold. To summarize, then, we covered why do we procrastinate? What is procrastination? Are we not motivated to do something? Or are there specific goals that we don't want to achieve or that are too hard and we're trying to distract ourselves by doing something too easy? Then we covered how can we stop procrastination. We discussed the importance of understanding external sources of dopamine, external inputs, and external sources of awareness. We covered how apps, while can be temporarily useful, they're like band-aids. So any methods or any sort of forest app or whatever it is, they'll work for a bit and then you'll get used to it. And then you will override that app because you always have that power and you just go back to whatever you're doing. We discussed the importance of awareness, of having less thoughts, right? And more awareness in whatever it is that you're doing, the importance of meditation. And lastly, we talked about what you gain, okay, when you don't procrastinate, or what you lose, I suppose, as well. Like you lose this whole jumbleness of thoughts in your head, all these distractions constantly going on in your mind, and you gain clarity. Okay, you're completely focused. Like that snake example, think of having a snake in your room and there's nothing else. There's no other thought in your head apart from making sure that you know exactly where that's going. So if you replace a snake with how you act, how you live your life, I think why you procrastinate will become self-explanatory. And this is individual for everyone. That's why I can't say go and use the forest app and it's going to solve your problems, because it isn't. There's going to be individual things, there's going to be individual distractions. But if you become more aware, you'll become knowledgeable, you understand what it is, and hopefully work towards solving it.
I
But
just
yeah,
have 2 points. I mean, on not on a serious note, if I had a rattlesnake in my room, I'll just procrastinate by just looking at the rattlesnake and not working on my work. I'll be like, where's the snake going? That's what I would do. And also, why would you want to think of penguins and polar bears when in the shower? That would be very interesting. Answer from you.
What? It's because it's cold. What do you mean?
Yeah, nothing.
It's
Yeah.
cold, man.
Every man for himself. Yeah, sure.
What do you? What? This is a weird,
You can cut it out if you want.
weird accusation. No, just because it's the cold, you know. Like when you think of the
Mhm.
cold, you
Yeah,
think of It's because I have cold showers. That's why.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Whereas Harris thinks of what the Dark Knight psychology when he's in the shower. Okay. Anyway, so Harish, what's next?
So yeah, this just goes back to our old tradition of one insight of the week. And basically, this is where we just share any random insight that we have come across this entire week. It doesn't have to be related. It doesn't have to be related to the topic. It could be anything that adds value to anyone's life. And to kick it off, we have Felix who will share his insight.
So Harish's whole sort of story about Diogenes, I was reminded of this story that I heard a while back. You may know it, Harish. So there was a point in the life of Diogenes. So Diogenes basically lives like Harish said. He just has like a strip of clothing. He just lives like on the street, basically, just like a homeless person, right? So there's a story where Alexander, so this is Alexander the Great, right? Not just like some random Alex, okay?
Oh,
Alexander.
I think I know the story. I think I know the story. Go on.
Okay, so basically, there's lots of paintings depicting this as well. You can go look it up. But anyway, so there's a story where Alexander stood over the philosopher Diogenes and said, I am Alexander, the great king. To which Diogenes responded, I am Diogenes, the dog. When Alexander asked what he had done to be called a dog, he said, I fawn on those who give me anything. I yelp at those who refuse, and I set my teeth in rascals, right? So that's what Diogenes said. So, in the most famous exchange of this whole sort of meetup, right? Alexander asked Diogenes whether there was anything he could do for him because Alexander's a great king. He's conquered so many things. He can do whatever he wants, right? And Diogenes, who was enjoying the warmth of the autumn sun, answered, Step aside to stop blocking the sun. Right? That's all he asked. And then he says, This abrupt response, showing his utter contempt for the power and prestige that Alexander craved, spawned the large number of artistic renderings that followed. Although Alexander's attendants took umbrage at Diogenes' rudeness to their king, Alexander himself was not displeased. Leaving, Alexander is said to have remarked, If I were not Alexander, I would want to be Diogenes. So that's a little bit of an aside because, like, Harish talking about that just triggered this story. Have you heard of this story,
Yeah,
Harish?
yeah. So, guys, yeah, my insight of the week is obviously is going to be about the psychology behind The Dark Knight. Everyone thinks, it's just a movie by Christopher Nolan, but actually, there is some deeper meaning behind each and every scene. There's this 30-minute documentary on YouTube. Please go check that out. And that pretty much concludes this episode. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please do check out Spotify, Red Circle, and iTunes, and basically every other popular platforms for more episodes. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at 10th Man, 10th as in the numerals. If you have a longer message, email us at official10thman@gmail.com, 10th written in numerals as well. To reach out to us personally, tweet me at Praboost, Praboost, through Twitter and Instagram. What about you, Felix?
Yeah, you can find me at Felix Bajor or some slight variation of it across all social media platforms or at my website, felixbajor.com.
And we also have a new announcement to make. Since Felix and I will be starting university soon, we'll be releasing every new episode every 2 weeks. Thank you for listening to us. Until next time, keep safe. 10th
Tenth
Man
Men
out.
out.